And welcome. Thanks for joining today. Today, we're going to talk about building intelligent IT infrastructure. Kind of describe what it actually means, what's all involved with it, and how it's actually going to change your lives or deliver for you for your future. Today, I'm going to be joined with Scott Sinclair, from a senior analyst from ESG. Say hi, Scott.
Hey, everyone.
And I'm Shawn Meyers, field CTO Tintri. If I can get my clicker on the right focus, I can actually advance slides. All right, so Shawn Meyers, field CTO Tintri. I've been doing IT now for 25 plus years professionally, and actually, as I joke with people, I've been doing IT now for 40 plus years. My dad was a developer for the Air Force, so I've had a computer in my house since 1980. So that's now 41 years of me being a geeky kid playing with computers. So as your kids grow up today, born and raised with computers, for most of my life. So I am the first generation, and you can see how I turned out. Some say good, some say bad. But yeah, I do a lot of things with databases. So I'm very involved in the SQL Server community. I also work with VMware and a lot of things, and I'm a technologist across multiple different facets. Scott, go ahead and introduce yourself.
You know, Shawn, I honestly wish I could boast the same resume that you just walked through. I'm a senior analyst with Enterprise Strategy Group, or ESG. I've been an analyst for about 7 years now, covering the IT industry, especially storage technologies and infrastructure technologies. We do a lot of work, and I'll get into a little bit of ESG in the next slide. But I've been in the IT industry for over 25 years as well, more from the vendor side. If actually, Shawn, if you want to hit to the next slide, I can walk through ESG and who we are. You know, some of you may have heard of us. We're an IT analyst firm, ESG or Enterprise Strategy Group. We have a heavy focus on research, validation, and strategy. We work with pretty much everyone within the IT industry. Some of you, hopefully most of you, will be familiar with our technology or economic validation work that we do as part of what we do as an analyst firm. But what we also do, which is what I'm here to talk about today, is a lot of our research. And so something that we do is we continuously try to better understand the needs and challenges of modern IT. And I hope I can kind of set the stage for this conversation, leveraging some of that data. So Shawn, if you want, we can kick it off.
I'm going to interrupt real quick because I forgot a few housekeeping things to begin to start off with. One, of course, is Q&A. So there's a Q&A session here. We can answer questions as you go. So if you have them, please go ahead and enter them to the Q&A so we can answer them. Also, after the webinar is over and it concludes, you will get a link via email to download the video later on or share with others. Just want to make sure you're aware that's coming up too. So again, and we prefer the questions as we're talking about it if possible, so feel free, but we'll have a more detailed Q&A session at the end. All right, back to you, Scott.
Well, sounds good. I'm excited to see questions. Maybe we can get ones that will stump us, or probably stump me, maybe not you. But anyway, so from our research standpoint, one of the big things, and it's hard to talk about really anything in IT without talking about digital transformation. This term gets thrown around a lot, but ultimately what it means is leveraging data or technology or IT services as a means to deliver a business outcome. And so in our research, this was conducted earlier this year, 98%, so basically everybody, is in some form of digital transformation. And when we ask why, again, it's about delivering business outcomes. You see goals around, we need to become more operationally efficient as an organization. We need to provide a better and more differentiated customer experience. And also we need to develop new products and services. Now, these were not the only reasons. We also see goals to unlock new markets, as well as actually deliver data or sell data or technology as a service as well, or as a product or a service as well, excuse me. But ultimately the goal here is business, pretty much for almost every business, depends on IT. And IT and the services IT provides are in that critical path to achieving business success and revenue growth. So what does that mean? If we hit the next slide, what we've also seen, and for those of you listening to this, probably see this every day and are living this, is a massive uptick in IT complexity just in recent years. So 3/4 of IT decision makers, IT leaders, say IT is more complex than it was just 2 years ago. Now, what's really fascinating is that number just last year, we asked that it's part of an annual study. So we're always keeping a pulse on how complexity is growing. When we asked this in 2020, only 64% of organizations, which is still high, said IT was more complex than it was 2 years ago. So in the past year, we've seen that number increase by 11 points. And so what's driving it? Well, basically, some of the top drivers are here, but you see just a massive uptick in the amount of data that we have to manage. There's a massive uptick in the number of devices and applications that we need to manage. We have nearly a third of organizations say they have a major digital transformation initiative underway, as well as nearly a third of organizations say, look, I have to manage, it's not just data center, it's not just cloud. I have to manage some on-premises locations, multiple cloud locations, possibly edge locations. So to net, we continue to see IT, everything increasing. We have more data, we have more apps, we have more locations, and we need to manage it and accelerate it even to keep up with these business initiatives. So if we go to the next slide, one of the other challenges that everyone's dealing with is you can't hire to keep up with this pace. We see within our research just problematic skill shortages across IT. We see some of the ones are labeled here, some of the top ones is nearly half of organizations identify a problematic skill shortage in cybersecurity. Over a third in AI, over a third in cloud architecture and planning, over a third in IT architecture and planning. And one of my favorite ones is nearly a third in IT orchestration and automation. So showing that even, and we'll get into this a little bit as we continue the conversation, even efforts to simplify environments with orchestration are actually not living up to the standards or their expectations, because if nearly a third of organizations can't hire enough people to do their automation, well, you do automation to help with skill shortages. So automation is in many cases is not living up to expectations. And what we also see is how organizations are responding to this is over half, 62% are saying, look, we've shifted our hiring practices away from domain experts, storage experts, network experts, to focus on more generalists, simply because it's people need to wear more hats. It's too difficult to find people that can be focused in multiple areas. It's just become too painful. And so when we look at how this is driving investment, on the next slide, what you see is, and these are trends in IT modernization. Where do you plan to invest? You see multiple areas where investment in tools and capabilities around simplification, around, a third saying we need to use more remote management within our infrastructure and data center infrastructure management. One out of every 4 organizations say, look, we're going to invest in more automation tools. And over 1 in 4 saying we're looking at AI to help actually assist in IT operations in some way. So the net of all this is businesses are demanding more from IT, making IT more complex. It's essentially impossible to hire enough people to keep up with all these demands. And businesses are looking to, okay, how do we go invest in smarter, better technology and tools to help address this? And that actually kind of lends to the topic we're talking about today, which is integrating intelligence into your infrastructure or intelligent infrastructure. And Shawn, if you hit to the next slide, I can kind of walk through. So as a precursor to some of the stuff Shawn's going to talk about, is I want to present from an ESG standpoint the way I think about intelligent infrastructure and understanding. And I put this together based off of everything I'm seeing going on in the industry. And so this is a trend that we've seen considerable innovation over the past several years. And net at a high level, there's lots of flavors of intelligent infrastructure, but at a high level, it's where the technology is able to collect telemetry data on really what's happening within the system, collect all that, leverage some sort of analysis, possibly artificial intelligence-based tools on top of that as a means to simplify the environment, either by providing insights into what's actually happening or delivering some sort of recommendations and possibly even automation. Now, there's a lot of different ways that people are leveraging telemetry data and combining it with intelligence to deliver outcomes or deliver benefits. So what you see on the screen is my high-level attempt to try to capture everything that's happening. And so I'm going to unpack what this slide looks like a little bit. So on the vertical axis, you see 3 different categories. At the bottom, the orange, you see increased insight or simplified planned actions. This is leveraging telemetry data and insights to simplify actions that we expect to happen. Things like, I'm going to go provision new storage, but I'm getting better insight into the demands of certain workloads. And because of that, I'm able to provision things either faster or more highly tuned to the actual needs of the workload rather than guessing. Eliminating guessing, eliminating a lot of work and analysis to be able to where the machine takes a lot of that lift and ultimately speed things up. The green is what I call continuous optimization technologies, or simplifying the day-to-day. This is where the system itself leverages telemetry data and provides insight to ensure that that utilization rates remain high, that workloads continue to get the performance that they expect, even as the environment evolves over time. So this is simplifying all those day-to-day efforts that you need around optimizing your overall environment. And then the blue that I labeled as predict and avoid, or simplify unplanned actions, this is how do we leverage intelligence and telemetry data to identify issues before they happen, and hopefully identify and actually provide recommendations or mitigate the issues before they actually impact the application environment, and in some cases actually mitigate them. So those are the categories. And what you'll see on the axis is I kind of put, as you go up the axis, or as you have capabilities that fall in more and more of these categories, you deliver greater value. Now, some solutions are more heavily indexed to one versus the other. There isn't any sort of set way in which they deliver, but this is kind of a good framework to think. The more types of capabilities that intelligent infrastructure is able to simplify, then the more value it provides. Now, if we transition to the horizontal axes, what we really see there is within each one of those categories, solutions deliver value based off of the breadth of infrastructure that they're able to collect insights into, and then use those insights to provide recommendations or even automation. The next is their ability to understand not just the infrastructure itself, but the actual data and application environment. So it's one thing to say, look, we understand what's going on in the storage volume, but actually to understand that storage volume is tied to a specific virtual machine actually provides better insights and better recommendations. And lastly is, again, the level of automation that you're able to achieve, moving from that idea of just providing insights to actually providing some recommendations to even allowing the system itself to automate some of the activities. And as you move along that curve, you deliver greater value as well. And net, the goal of all of this is just to use data to figure out a way to allow the system itself to just make IT's life easier and eliminate a lot of the heavy lift and the these really just high effort but low reward activities that consume a lot of IT operations, and really put that back on the infrastructure team. And so that's the way I see it, that from an outside ESG perspective. But Shawn, I think this is a good time to transition to you and kind of let you take it away and talk about Tintri's perspective on
Sure. Great. And thanks. Appreciate that. And this is, fantastic on understanding how you view intelligent infrastructure. So from your perspective, what do you think is the biggest gain or advantage organizations have as they implement intelligent infrastructure?
Shawn, mileage is going to vary, but obviously based on their environment, their application environment. But one area is, if I was going to actually name one, I'd probably put in the blue, candidly. I think, if you think about, planned actions and day-to-day optimization, these are things that can be more controlled and mitigated. You can sit and allocate, you can say, okay, we're going to have a big application deployment. We want to focus on that. But unplanned actions, those issues that are either hard to diagnose or pop up or involve, how systems interact with other systems, sometimes those are unexpected. They can show up at the worst possible time. They add risk to the application environment and the business, and they can consume tons of resources. And so insights there, I would say more often than not, provide a bigger bang for their buck. But obviously, it does depend on the environment.
Okay, well, thanks. So now we're going to spend a little time after we learned what intelligent infrastructure is. We're going to talk about how Tintri views intelligent infrastructure, and then actually what we actually have created and built today that focuses on intelligent infrastructure to make your organizational lives better. First thing we got to go back is what we call the Tintri believes, or we believe statements. What we mean by that is we're a different company from most companies when it comes to infrastructure. So we believe that storage management is basically meaning managing application objects, i.e. VMs, databases, containers, not managing storage constructs. Stop thinking about volumes, LUNs, data stores. In other words, we want to focus where the work is at, because at the end of the day doesn't matter if your LUN is performing at 100, everything is green on it, if the application is crawling and your customers or end users can't use it properly because there's something else in the stack that's causing a problem. Storage is one piece. It's not a silo. It is part of the whole thing. So our belief comes down to making the focus on the entire stack and overall the application itself. So we always focus on the application needs, not the infrastructure. The infrastructure should kind of be just like an iPhone. It just works. I shouldn't have to think about making sure things tune properly. No one wakes up and goes, hey, is my iPhone set up properly today? It should be set up properly every day. I should never have to think about it. And, oh, but the app I have installed may not be working properly. We may have to focus on that. That's what we want to do. So again, spend all of our time at the application level, not the storage level, which is a little bit different because everybody else in the storage industry focuses on talking about how fast their speeds and feeds and storage systems really are, which we don't really talk about very much. We talk about, again, overall experience processes. So 4 areas of focus. So we're going to kind of hit back on these 4 main areas. So we view most of the time storage administrators spend is in these 4 categories, which is performance optimization, capacity optimization, planning for the future, especially during budget time, because we spend a lot more time trying to plan during budgets to figure out how we forecast to make sure we know we have the right money to purchase the right things when we need them. And then, of course, policy management, which, of course, policy management is all the data protection tasks, so your snapshots, your replication, how I make sure if I'm, say, a pipeline company and I've got a malware attack, how can I recover from that without having to pay ransoms? All those things fall into my policy management world. So first, what we offer here is intelligent quality of service. So if you're on the left, this is what we view as all storage vendors look like. What it is, we call it the IO blender, meaning I've got all kinds of workloads. I've got SAP, VDI, ERPs, whatever else, big databases, and they all have different IOs. The problem is I put them in the system and then they go through this giant funnel and then they come out of the funnel at one at a time. There's no necessarily prioritization of it. They kind of go first in, first out queue processes, and it causes some contention and I have really no visibility. And this is where your latency comes from, or what we call the noisy neighbor issue comes from, because it's all in one giant thing. Versus with the Tintri VM store, what we do is workload performance isolation. So every object gets its own IO path, and we're tracking each individual IO so we can see the separation. So we know how much is going for each one, and we can now track what you have used and have been using and make sure we have enough reserves so we don't have any slowdown processes. This is really great from us. Allows us to do what we call QoS, our quality of service, meaning we're monitoring how much, say, your Oracle database is using in terms of IOPS all the time. So that way, when 100 VDIs spin up and you have that IO storm from a VDI spinning up, we're going to reserve enough resources for that Oracle database object to continue to run at the speed it has been running. So it won't slow down. And that's what we mean by QoS. So each individual object, whether it be, again, a database or a virtual machine or whatever, will be managed individually and allow us to provide that level of granular detail. This is how we're going to talk about performance optimization, because this allows us to make sure we're spreading the load. Because even though you might have one really big, giant, fast workload, most customers have hundreds, if not thousands of things they're trying to run at the same time. So yes, running one really big fast one, or making sure I can provide consistent performance against these thousands of objects I'm running. And that's where the QoS process allows us to automatically do this. And this QoS is using AI and machine learning to automatically calculate all this. So no user intervention is required. It just happens. Yes, there's knobs under the covers. We can go tune and tweak to make things work if you want to work a little bit differently, kind of stuff, which is always fun to do. But the vast majority happens automatically without having to add more complexity to your system. Next thing, scale out. So this is how we're addressing some of the capacity and performance issues again. So you're spending performance tuning and capacity tuning. Like in the chart here on the left, we've got basically 4 arrays. Obviously, we have a lot more objects than 2 or 3 kind of stuff. But for the picture of this, hey, this big giant Oracle green block is on number 2, and it's using up all of our resources from a capacity and performance perspective. So we automatically move things around up to array 1 or down to array 4, so I can get a better balance between all my workloads. And this happens automatically, or you can trigger it to do it when you want to, kind of stuff. The cool thing about this, again, as I run out of capacity or performance, I can just expand by adding additional arrays. This works with multiple hypervisors. So if you're on Zen, Hyper-V, or VMware, or whatever, it will automatically work. And the other amazing thing too is, as we're going to talk about policies later on, your snapshot and all your policies are applied at the object level. What that means is, as I move things around, my policies stay the same. So on traditional storage, we tend to have the one or the bucket basically has a policy attached, and I might have gobs and gobs of policies. And as I move things back and forth between different ones, the policy of that object, as I moved it, i.e. I vMotion a VM or storage vMotion a VM, it may affect things because the where it ended up at has a different policy attached to it. Here, we're going to attach the policy at the object, so it doesn't matter where it moves, it's going to have the same policies, which is fantastic. So again, see here, doing capacity, we're running out of space, we'll find a better place for it, we'll balance it out. We're running out of performance, we'll look at your systems and automatically balance it back out, and we'll move it back and forth without involving, say, your hypervisor. So in other words, we don't have to use storage DRS to move these things around. We're doing it in our system, and it's much more efficient. It's much better than using VAAI to offload tasks. We're going to do it at our levels, which of course, for us, moving the workload to the lowest level in the stack always makes the most sense. It means it's less complex and usually is more robust and faster. The higher the stack, the more pieces working, the more rule sets you can have, which can cause more complexity and more things to break. So Tintri Analytics, the next thing. This is where we do your long-term planning process. And actually, if you go read just about any analyst who's reviewing Tintri systems, especially the VM store, they'll mention Tintri Analytics is probably the best solution out there from an analytics perspective. What we provide is per object level data. And what that means is every virtual machine, every database has its own data, and I can go model that on a one-to-one basis, or I can group it together. So I can go have my SQL Server databases. I can see how much performance it's been using. Because the great thing, like DBAs, because I'm a DBA by trade, I've always been, I call myself an infrastructure DBA, meaning I've always had to understand how to tune servers, adjust BIOS to make the SQL Server go faster. So most DBAs can tell you how much space their database is using. Most DBAs can never tell you what performance or how many IOPS a database is using. They don't know, but they do know when it doesn't get enough, it causes the application to be slow. So here we've got object level, like I said, per database metrics on the performance, the amount of IOPS per database, for example, or per virtual machine. We can stack that all up and look at it. And then we can do modeling, which allows us to now do forecasting. So we keep 3 years of object level data. Well, I can now take it in individual or groups. So I can take all my databases, all my VDIs, all my Oracle systems, all my Splunk systems, and then I can get, or everything combined and go, look, do I have enough capacity from a space perspective or performance capacity from a IOPS perspective? And then also I have trend lines. And then I can use those 3 years of history trend lines to see what my future is going to go. Will I be over my chart, or am I going flat? And that helps me understand when I'm going to run out. I can actually forecast 18 months into the future, knowing, hey, I'm going to need more storage, or I'm perfectly fine for 18 months. And I can pinpoint based upon the last 3 years when that actually is. And the other thing with the modeling too is we mine data from our customers, meaning so in your budget, you're going to be deploying Splunk this year. You need some sort of log management process, and Splunk is one. But now you got to figure out how much usage is Splunk going to have. And say you're a mid-sized company, but you happen to have a lot of IoT things, and you're going to have many, many more objects in Splunk than most people will. So we actually have, based upon our current customer base, hundreds of customers who are running Splunk already, and we know how much resources each of those Splunk systems are using, and we can help model for you. So you can go into mid-sized companies, Splunk deployment. Oh, but I mentioned you're doing a lot of IoT with that for Splunk. You're going to go ahead and go to a large size because you're going to be big, and you can see how much storage IOPS that Splunk may be using with other large companies, and now compare it onto your systems. And do you have the capacity to handle that? And we have this for lots of different applications. And it's not just, for databases, Oracle, for Exchange, for SAP, for a lot of different ERPs. So it can help you figure out what you need to do, which all provides you those what we call actionable insights to know when I need to be budgeting, how soon it's going to be, do I need to move things off around, this kind of stuff. And just lots of different things in this world that we can do that nobody else can, because we're tracking everything on the per object level. I can go look at a LUN all day long and see how much it's grown in performance-wise, but I'd have to go back and trend out which VMs are on it at the different times. So this one moved on and off. I don't have that information at a LUN level because it moved in, moved out, it moved wherever because of other policies. And my big picture for the array is fine, but I don't have granular to know what's driving all that. Is it my database? We did an upgrade 6 months ago, and look, the database now uses 3 times the IOPS as I did before. All this information easily found and easily gleaned through our analytics system. So this actually helps us with mostly the long-term planning, but I can still do it from a performance perspective and capacity perspective because I'm seeing what's going on with it, and I can spot changes in application workflows. Policy management. And I don't have any pretty chart. I just put a screenshot in here. Mostly the screenshot here shows off why it's just so easy. We talk about the UI for us is quite simple. Just about any IT generalist, you don't need to be a storage expert to come in and go figure out how to set up snapshot and replication processes. And so we can replicate off to another VM store, to your DR site, to an S3 destination anywhere in the world, basically. So however you want to do it, we can do lots of different things with this. And just about anybody can come in and see what this is. I mean, hourly snapshot. I'm going to do it every day. It retains 8 copies of it local for that hour, and then 3 hours of 3 copies of the remote site. It's really quite simple. And my snaps are every 15 minutes. We can do high frequency snaps. We can do multiple different categories of different things. And it's just quite simple replication. I can just set it up and it just works. So cool things about this: simple setup. Talked about that. I'm doing it per object, not per LUN or volume. I'm not creating a bucket and then have to make sure the object I want to fits with the bucket. I'm putting the rule on the object. It just kind of sense to us. Do it individually. I can do it per database, per VM, per whatever. Or I can use what we call service groups, so I can do it by a group of objects instead of trying, because obviously if you have 12,000 objects, you can't imagine trying to set up a policy for each one individually. Guess what? Oh, individually we can do it as a service group. So now I can have BDIs. I can put them all in one bucket and make them all have the same policy. If I want to have one special one because it's the CEOs, I can go ahead and put that over here and apply different things. And we have precedence rules to make sure your systems will work properly the way you want to. So I can do it any way I really want to. And again, I already mentioned the autonomous policy propagation. So the migrations don't impact it. So as things move around, because you have to move things in a dynamic environment, and in fact, this does most of the moving automatically for you, your policies don't get violated, which is the most important thing. Because so often I see, hey, this is our policy. Oh, but we had a space issue, so we moved it over here. It didn't have the same policy, so now we don't actually have the protection level we thought we did. Always a bad thing. So overall, basically, just infrastructure and how this actually works. So we call it smart storage, intelligent infrastructure, lots of different names for it. But we're a purpose-built file system, meaning most storage is a ZFS takeoff of some sort. We are purpose-built, meaning we're designed around the workload, aka the application. We're doing it per file, per space. So we're tracking every object type on there, which gets us the analytics we want. All that data points you can get because we're tracking it as it goes in and out of the IO system. We're not trying to figure it out later on. Most other storage vendors who are trying to do per object stuff is pulling the object data from some other system. They're not getting it natively because they just see a block that's being changed. They don't see what it is being changed. And then, of course, we help you automate everything with our API. So biggest thing, talked about again, the no ones, tracking the IOs, the auto QoS. That's just the amazing thing with the auto QoS, removes all your noisy neighbor issues. So imagine running a storage array and you've got 1,000 VDIs on it. Oh, heck, let's go whole hog. 3,500 VDIs running on this. I now drop a 500 gig Oracle database in there. Everybody else who runs storage and manages things, they're now petrified. They know that Oracle database will not run properly in that VDI environment because that storage is tuned for VDI. With the VM store, it runs just fine because the QoS provides the Oracle system what it needs. So all those the storage boot storms or storage storms your VDIs cause does not impact everything else. So again, per managed object for everything.
Hey, Shawn, real quick, I think we're going to have a poll question that I think we want to jump in here, if possible. There we are.
All right, so here's the poll question. So how do you determine which of your VMs are experiencing the greatest latency? So go ahead, feel free to answer that question because I'm curious. To help us, because most people have these problems on a semi-regular basis. We'll give it about another second, 10, 15 seconds for people to answer, and then we'll continue on.
I figure we would have an option that says who complains the loudest. Just, but I guess that's not on there.
Well, we should be proactive and not reactive, and that's what the problem is. I don't ever think about reactions anymore because we're trying to be proactive on everything we do here.
That's true.
All right, thanks for your input, and then I think we'll have access to the poll a little bit later on, and I can review that. Oh, there's the results up, and so using vCenter. So the thing is with vCenter, it's great, except it's not per VM very well. It's using it your data stores, and you can go look at it. You can kind of get the numbers. With the VM store process, it is quite simply just right there. You log in, we see all of our objects. We can sort it by latency and quick spot which one it is. And the cool thing is, it actually looks at and tells you where the stuff's coming from because we're actually pulling your from ESX top, your KAVG, DAVG, and GAVG numbers right from there and can show it on the screen. So we can tell you if it's network, it's VMware kernel, if it's the host, or it's somewhere in the storage stack. And then we break up the storage stack even further from our controllers, from our SSD, from our contention, which is our QoS process, anywhere in the stack kind of process. And then, of course, we don't have the ability to do that. It's over a quarter of the respondents, meaning they can't do it because it is difficult. And the fun thing is when I give a customer a VM store, a lot of times they go, we spent 3 weeks troubleshooting this by moving VMs around off the data store to figure out which VM was causing the problem. And they look at our managed objects tab in TGC and go, oh, that's the problem. That was 5 seconds. We spent 3 weeks managing it. The time savings alone is mind-boggling for some of these people. They can't believe it actually works that simply. Oops, I clicked the wrong way. All right. So, end of the day, kind of that point was there. Save 95% of storage admin time. That number sounds like one of those funny claims that marketing people always make. We can back it up. We've got millions of objects that we've managed, and we've got, end of the day, talking with our customers, we've saved literally millions of hours of admin time on doing things. So how we look at this? So table stakes at the bottom: flash, thin provisioning, dedupe, compression. We expect all storage systems to have that. That's just table stakes to enter the game. Think of NASCAR. You know what? I can't show my stock car, my modified Charger to a NASCAR race in it. So table stakes, obviously, means I already have a NASCAR. But now we've added all kinds of things: the per object level quality of service, the database management, or the data management at object level, my object level visibility, things that nobody else can do. They cannot provide object level things without doing like installing agents on all your machines, which you're using extra CPU and resources to have those agents running. We're monitoring this as the IO is occurring. So my object level automation, so I can do things with my REST or PowerShell. With REST, if you have a CDCI or CI/CD or DevOps systems where they're doing a lot of processes, we plug into all of those, and you can automate all of the things you want to do with that per object. Again, application is our focus. It is the application performance was what we all should only care about. I keep talking about SLAs. SLA, every application in my book should have an application-based SLA. And that's not just uptime, that has performance expectations. Can I meet XYZ process, i.e. screen refreshes every 3 seconds or whatever number you want to have? Application is the focus in which the VM store allows you to stop thinking about how to manage my storage and start managing my applications. And next we have some customer stories.
Well, I'll jump in on this one, Shawn, because this was one of your customers that I spoke with. One of the things, and I probably should have started off with this at the beginning. I had the opportunity to speak to a couple Tintri customers, and at a high level, I talked to a lot of IT, executives, IT administrators, and just the level of enthusiasm and just how effusive the Tintri customers were with their praise was really shocking. These were some of the big quotes that I had in the first conversation. Then I have another slide on the second one. So this environment, it was a VP of VDI engineering, and their organization had 35,000 virtual machines, and they were actually planning to scale up to 60,000. And you see just some of the quotes here. They're really, when they were looking for a solution, one of the big things that came across in the conversation, because I asked them, okay, what were your goals? Why did you select Tintri? What were you thinking about? And they said, look, simplicity was key. I mean, they basically talked about the scale of their environment. They go, we just can't hire 40 to 50 people that you have there. The other thing that they looked at was they did a heavy focus, because this comes up quite a bit whenever organizations talk about simplicity, especially around data center, is the cloud and cloud services show up. And this individual, this executive, actually said him and his team did extensive studies on the public cloud providers. And what they found was with Tintri, they were able to beat it by a considerable amount with a couple bucks per month per virtual machine. And those types of stories are not, it is uncommon, the extent than the value that Tintri is able to provide. But those types of, comparisons are things I'm starting to hear more and more. I mean, just the value that Tintri is able to deliver. And the big thing, which I think really just hits home and really validates a lot of what Shawn was talking about, is the quote that came through, which said, look, this helped us free up time to do our normal day jobs. We see in IT that, and this is just a common theme, is demands have scaled, everything's scaled, but teams are basically the same people. It's, if you have 3 people, you tend to still have 3 people. You don't go from 3 people to 30 people. Even though you may be managing 10x the environment. And they framed it as a set it and forget it device. And one of the big things that I asked was, I said, okay, well, tell me how much, if you're going to summarize, you're going to think about everything that happened, how much do you think that this saved? And he goes, oh, saved a few $1 million for sure. Like, there was no hesitation in that conversation. So if you think about just the need to accelerate, the need to basically continue to manage this level of scale. And actually, he was very confident in Tintri's ability to hit this future scale where they want to go to 60,000 in the conversation, 60,000 virtual machines, excuse me. But the ability to be able to confidently handle the scale today and manage future scale without worrying about, oh my gosh, how are we going to manage this from a personnel standpoint, and actually free up time, to me, that's significant, because as your business tries to do more digital initiatives, you need more resources. And if you can't hire, the only way to do that is to free up the people you already have, or free up time with the people you already have.
Yeah, I mean,
So
with COVID and VDI, we saw massive increases in overall utilization of people having VDI systems, and we now have customers who are managing over 100,000 VDI desktops in their virtual environments using only Tintri storage. And the amount of arrays we have in those environments is relatively small. People are shocked at how many VDIs you can fit onto a single Tintri VM store array.
Yeah, Shawn, you mentioned COVID, and COVID's kind of been I think everyone's tired of hearing about it because it's kind of become a dirty word, but simply because we're so close, the vaccines are coming here, we're hopefully getting out of it. But at the end of the day, what's come away with it is an understanding of the need for flexibility, the need for, as an organization, to be able to have the capability to pivot if something unforeseen happens. And how you do that is by having technology that is intelligent, that can free up time for the IT team to be able to focus on something that emerges, but also something that has the confidence or something that has the capability to where you have the confidence that it can respond to a massive increase in demand, which is exactly what we saw within this conversation. And then there was one other conversation, which I have some quotes on the next slide. So this was a different Tintri customer, a lead IT solutions architect. And we looked at what they were trying to do. I pulled in some quotes, but there was more. They were really looking at an overall Tintri investment, what they saw. They commented quite a bit on how amazing the performance was. That didn't come through in the slide, but it came through in the conversation. One of the other big things that happened was just the need to simplify things from an administrative standpoint. He talks about here, he goes, what it used to take him 4 hours to do to try to think about, okay, how's the storage going to be able to manage this application environment? What's the right way to tune it or configure it? That used to take them 4 hours to stand things up. And now they can do it in 15 minutes. And one of the big things within this environment was they had huge demands from a growing application development team, and just the need to support and accelerate what their developers were doing was a key part. And basically the second quote there that you see is very much a yes, this was, the performance was amazing, but also I have something else where it talks about how, because of that performance and because of how simple it was to speed things up, the actual application developers were complimentary of the solution. By complimentary, a lot of that meant they stopped complaining, but often it was we were actually able to look at the development time, and they were actually able to see an improvement in development time because of the Tintri solution.
Oh yeah, I mean, the fact that we can do things at an object level, we can clone and snapshot, clone systems. So test dev, regression testing. So you can go back and do your QA through thousands of tests and do each test on its own isolated environment. No longer creating one environment and then have to run 100 tests and then have to revert it then, and then trying to figure out, we had 4 failures. Did failure 2 cause failure 4? Now each individual test can be completely isolated and know what your dependencies or errors really are. And we can do that in seconds, that where others would take you hours, or you'd be carving up a LUN per VM, which is not sustainable in any virtual environment. So now another customer story. So Takeda is one of our favorite customers to talk about. So they're a spinoff from a larger parent company. They're a pharmaceutical firm. They do all kinds of things. But when they got spun off, it was, hey, you're being spun off. We need you out of our data center and not accessing our system because you're now a separate company. We need to isolate, split you ASAP. And so one of the quotes they have here on the right basically is they needed to get out of the data center. So they basically showed up with servers and VM stores at the new data center. And in less than a week, they actually had workloads. So they had switches, servers, and VM stores. Now let's go rack it, stack it, configure it, and move workloads. And so in less than a week, they're doing. Just about any other storage vendor out there, you would still be waiting for professional services trying to get the storage configured and set up properly. In fact, the Tintri VM store, we don't even have a professional services SKU, meaning you can't pay us to install it because we feel it's that easy. everybody can install it. We actually had a video a while ago of 1 hour from box to production, basically from the time the customer receives it, they racked it, assigned an IP, there's 3 or 4 configuration settings, and then attach it to their VMware vCenter, and they moved a VM to it. Basically, all of that happened in under an hour, and they're reusing the storage. The cool thing with all the Auto QoS and all the tuning settings, those are all automatic, so they didn't have to go in and make any changes. Yes, they had to still go create their policies if they wanted to, but everything else is already done for them. So they're amazed at the ability to the visibility, so they can see per VM and all those latency issues we talked about earlier, that they could pinpoint exactly what the problem was at. And then the QoS, that they just rave about the QoS and how it makes sure that the entire environment will run properly. They don't focus on this one thing having to run really, really fast. You got to worry about the other 400 applications you're managing, and the fact that all summarize together, they all work predictably, and we don't have gobs and gobs of, it was slow for an hour ago kind of stuff. Those kind of things. Those tickets just kind of all go away. And this is one of my favorite stories. I was on a call with a customer. I was actually still fairly new with the company. And we're doing a roadmap call. So we're talking about what the cool things we're doing in the future. They had, hey, we want this feature. And we're like, that feature already exists. So, okay, let's show us how to use it. So we decided to go log into TGC, which is the management pane, for them to go look and stuff. So we go, okay, log in your TGC. They stop, they pause. They're a VMware shop. They use the vSphere web client plugin for managing the array. So that from there, you can do all your snapshots, your clones from inside with a Tintri basically plugin inside of vCenter. So they do most of their basic things, but that handles day-to-day operations, but there's a lot of other things you can't do there, i.e. set up replication hosting or whatever. And I forget what feature they're asking about. So we said, log into TGC, and again, they just paused. I had to go look up through our data metrics that we phone home through, we call it, to figure out what the IP address of their TGC is. So they can go, okay. And then they had to talk to 3 or 4 different people, including the people who set it up. They didn't remember what the password was. Thankfully, it's still a default, which is a security problem. But the fact that they've been running this for 6 months, they have never actually had to really log into the system because it just works. So the short version of this for me is, it's not like you forget things. It's just, hey, if you logged into your storage system today or in the past week to do what you consider a routine or mundane or a simple task, you don't have intelligent infrastructure, you don't have autonomous storage. And I found out since I've been here, we have many customers who just don't log into their systems ever because it just works. I've met a couple who have not been over it. They log in about once a year to check a few things out, or if a drive fails, they get email alerts, then they log in. But they don't manage storage. It is just done for them. They don't want to go in and carve up LUNs and rebalance things back and forth. They don't have to get the reports because the Auto QoS is handling all the latency, all those slowdown, noisy neighbor issues have stopped. They're not in there troubleshooting because they don't need to troubleshoot. And of course, if they need to troubleshoot, it's still simple, but most of them just don't need to do it anymore. And that's what we really like to talk about, is just, putting the focus back onto the application. That's all we have. I didn't have a QA slide for some reason, but we do have some questions that came in. Let's go see here. All right, first one. Simplification from intelligent infrastructure. Why don't we just use the cloud? That's a great question. The answer for me, of course, is quite simple from an intelligent infrastructure perspective, for us at least, is, well, the cloud's more expensive. But what I mean by that is, if you looked at our analytics and our VM stores, the detail and data we're providing you is more advanced and more detailed than any cloud provider can provide you. So we actually have more information about your workload than they can give you. Also, they have nothing in their thing to prevent that noisy neighbor process. Yes, they have all these cool fancy things to move things around on the back end to keep it all working, but you can still have noisy neighbor problems and you have no insight into that. It's all hidden. So if you complain about performance over time, their answer is, you need to pay more for more guaranteed performance. All it means is you write a bigger check, we'll give you, and so you're basically paying for oversubscription per VM, just to make sure your system works. So you keep paying more and more and more to get better isolation from other things. Well, that's already built into here. So the intelligent infrastructure process allows you to control this, and now your workloads are being balanced properly, and you're not paying extra for oversubscription, which you would do in the cloud. Next question. So how or why and how is it so different from all other storage platforms out there? And so this is more of a thing, as I mentioned, we have our own custom operating system. So our file system was built. We actually were, when we were a startup 10 plus years ago, we actually had 16 file system PhD engineers who spent 2 years, under the covers before we went public with the fact we're building this to write this file system. And the file system was designed with the purpose and concept. In fact, our president and CEO, our founder, Kieran at the time, he actually was one of the storage, senior storage VPs or directors over at VMware, and wrote kind of things what vVol should be. And he understood that VMware wants to make storage be the work this way. It's just he realized that VMware could never do that. So he left to go found a new company to go do what he thought storage should be from an abstraction at the VM level, not, again, this data store concept. All right, next one. Do you see any pushback in the industry against automation? That's always an interesting question. So yes and no. Most people love automation because it allows them to stop doing tedious tasks. And then they write scripts to do that. They write orchestration tools. They pay money from other third-party vendors to come automate things for them. And so those people are embracing change, but also because they're at the breaking point. They have too much work. Just about everybody in IT has too much work to do today and can't get it all done in time. So then there's the ones who push back on it. There are ones who are a little bit afraid of change. Also, they're afraid if we automate too much, we can automate someone out of a job, and so those ones exist. And there's two facets. One is, well, if they're the person who wants to do a manual process still, is this the person you really want working for you? You want the person thinking for the future. You want the innovators on your team, not the ones, let's keep doing it the old fashioned way. I mean, there are, I remember back in the day, we never created drives greater than 200 gig in size because we couldn't back them up properly. Now we don't, I see systems that have, multi-terabyte drives from a backup process. And, imagine if I was running I worked on a 2 petabyte database. Imagine if I had to have drives at 200 gig to stripe across all that. I mean, it's a logical nightmare. So anybody who's stuck in the past needs to think about the future. But those who see the writing on the wall, there's more and more and more tasks, there's more demands on them. The only way we can accomplish that is with automation. And with that, machine learning, AI, artificial intelligence is going to help drive that. And the cool thing is for us is before AI ops, which is the next buzzword that you hear a lot about, intelligent infrastructure is here today and allows you to solve many of these things from an infrastructure perspective right now, at least from your storage side, before everything else catches up from other parts of it. Which the next question I see coming in here.
Shawn, real quick, if I can add a little color commentary too, because we see that in our research. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You're perfectly fine.
When we were doing research, I want to say 6-7 years ago, there was a significant portion of IT and especially storage admins that were kind of, I don't want to say afraid, but we're concerned about automation and saying, look, I don't know, this may impact my job, everything else. It wasn't a big amount, but I think it was somewhere in the 30 percentile range. And now if we ask those similar questions, it's very, very small. And it really is, it echoes that exact same thing that you said, is everyone is so swamped. And I tried to articulate that with some of our research. Everyone is so many tasks right now and are so strapped for resources that there is other stuff your business wants you to do. So, so just saying, we see the same thing in our research. All right, you can go back.
Yeah, even to stay on that same point, it's just the DR testing. Everyone knows they need to do DR testing. Nobody ever has time to do DR testing. Now, imagine if day-to-day operations are a lot more streamlined. Hey, I can actually squeeze in a few cycles of DR testing. We actually try to do the failover to our DR. We tried to spin up our workload that was on-prem in the cloud to then fail it back for whatever your process is. That stuff doesn't get done. And, so back when my last job, I was a consultant. I worked for a company, and they took DR seriously because they lost their main data center in 9/11. It was in the towers. They happened to have a solid DR and had invested in it. And so they actually had data center in Colorado. They stayed in business versus a vast majority of their competitors who lost their main data centers stopped being in business. So anything we built with them, DR was the main key facet for it. Again, massive area. Everyone agrees we should do it. Most people never find time. This helps us basically with intelligent infrastructure, free up those times to focus on the high payoff activities. We all see that quadrant of the, high level versus high activity, and there's a quadrant up there. We always want to focus on the top right quadrant. The problem is most of the time we spend most of our day in the bottom left with high stress, low payoff activities. This helps us move out of that bottom quadrant up into the quadrants that provide innovation and value to the organization, whether the business, nonprofit, whatever, but providing those values. All right, I think we have time for one last question, which is, do I see intelligent infrastructure solutions follow the same or other intelligent infrastructure solutions? So, I mean, if you go Google intelligent infrastructure now, you're going to see, Cisco, all HP, all your hardware vendors are talking about some facet of intelligent infrastructure. And some of the other storage companies are as well. And the problem is most of them, especially from the other storage companies, they're still stuck in the LUN model. They can't get out of that. They can't ever get to the intelligence needed to do it per application. You're starting to see some really cool things in networking just around the bend, or some testing, everything, maybe have it live, like intelligent VLAN management, with tagging. So all of a sudden, a new VLAN starts showing it talking on a network port. Hey, right now you have to log in, change it to go re-add it. Hey, if there's a bunch of traffic and it looks through heuristics as valid traffic, go ahead and use it properly. I shouldn't have to configure switches to tell them to do things that it can figure out on its own, and that kind of stuff. And there's so many areas of networking that can be auto done, especially network traffic. They should be able to, if they actually had some insight into the packets going across, they could be able to see if someone's stealing data without having to examine it. The switch itself could do this. There's so many things with intelligent infrastructure that are coming, but I don't see a lot there yet. But the good news is we'll have a lot more things coming on, at least from a storage perspective. You're already there with the Tintri VM store. Scott, any final comments?
No, I just echo that. It's always great to see what people like Tintri are doing, but this is the savings that organizations are getting from the work that you're doing around intelligent infrastructure is just amazing. And I think one final thought that I should have put in my research deck, but I didn't, is a couple of years back we looked at not IT organizations but line of business teams and we asked them, what's your opinion of IT? And about 1 in 4 said IT is a business inhibitor. And when we said why, it was because IT services aren't being delivered fast enough. And what's really interesting is when I ask IT organizations, what's your top job? It's about availability, it's about service availability, it's about data resiliency, it's about making sure nothing goes down. And where this comes back to is it comes back to the need for something like intelligent infrastructure is as digital transformation happens more and more, the perception of what is IT's job is changing. And so even though you may think you're an amazing IT organization, nothing goes down, there's probably some executive over there saying, you know what, I submitted this ticket, it's taken me a week, I need this to be a day. And how you get to that, or it needs to be a few hours, how you get to that is by leveraging tools like intelligent infrastructure.
Yes, definitely. Intelligent infrastructure, IT governance is the worst slowdowns. And don't get me wrong, IT governance needs to be there. The thing is, we need to find a way to automate nearly all facets of the IT governance, and intelligent infrastructure is one of those ways we can do a lot of things to make IT governance not be the inhibiting factor, because we have to have it or else we don't have a business. But because of that, we tend to slow down innovation. So any of your app dev, line of business people, their app dev teams, they're always complaining about not getting the resources. And then of course, when you can't provide them, then you're able to shadow IT and all kinds of other things. So now you have IT without governance, which is very, very scary as well. So yeah, intelligent infrastructure is probably the only way to be able to handle and meet the needs of your business. And so the companies that switch to basically using IT as their innovator / driver of their business are the ones that are going to be most successful going forward. Thank you for your time. We really glad you're here. You joined us, and we hope you learned a lot. Again, don't forget, you're going to get an email with a copy of the recording, so feel free to pass on to your friends. And if you want to see a demonstration of this, feel free to go into the Tintri products and request a demo. We can do full, sit with a salesperson to give you a full demo and how it actually works, because I made some great promises that you may not believe, but once you see it in real life, you're like, wow, that is amazing. I love when we could travel around to shows and I can show customers this, and you watch their eyes get big when they finally grasp it really works the way we say it does. So I'm not giving marketing fluff. It really does work, and seeing is believing for us. And thank you for your time.